The Poco X2 is finally here and it's clearly going against the Realme X2. Yeah, the X2 brothers. But what most of you guys are curious about as to what happens to the Redmi Note 8 Pro, considering that the Poco is just priced a tad bit higher than the Redmi device. Well, you guys have already read the title and there's no point beating the bush around here. So let's get down to the camera comparison. Hey guys, this is Varun from Guiding Tech and today I'll be putting the cameras of the Poco X2 versus the Realme X2 and the Redmi Note 8 Pro to see which phone offers the best quad camera setup at this price point. Let's get started. Okay, so let's start with some daylight shots. So in this first shot you can see that both the Poco and Realme add a yellowish tone to the overall image, while the Note 8 Pro chooses to just scale the contrast a bit. Now this makes the image look slightly more detailed, though on pixel peeping, both the Xiaomi devices have the same amount of details. Moving on to the next image, you can see that this time Realme opts for a red hue for some reason. Between the two Xiaomi devices, Poco is doing a much better job, which is clearly evident from the structure of the trees. The Note 8 Pro prefers over-sharpening and over-contrasting, while Poco does a far better job of representing true colors. Now in this next HDR shot, you can see that the Note 8 Pro struggles to keep the details of the building intact. That said, credit where it's due, the colors are the most true tone on the Note 8 Pro only. Poco has gone for a higher contrast, which definitely looks a lot better to the eye, but isn't realistic. As for Realme, the end image is just too dark and it will require some tuning on your end. So moving on to some greens, Poco shines here since it manages to keep the colors intact. The Note 8 Pro takes the green into account and turns the yellows into lime, while Realme, well, it takes the yellows into account and saturates the greens. It's not an easy shot for any camera and goes to show just how AI on each phone interprets the subject. Now the same can be highlighted in this next shot of the bench. The Note 8 Pro goes for a higher contrast once again, while Poco goes for a warmer tone in the background, taking the orange in the subject. Yes, orange. The bench was orange, not red. Now Realme does a good job of keeping the colors in the bottom half of the bench, but the top portion of it is still saturated to some extent. So in this last image, Realme shows a weird halo effect while trying to incorporate the direct sun in the frame. The Note 8 Pro does a decent job, but as always puts the contrast a bit higher, and it's Poco that truly shines here. Now moving on to the ultra-wide cameras, all three cameras do a decent job, though Note 8 Pro has slightly more details here. Poco has a slight red tone, while Realme, weirdly enough, has a slightly soft image. Also, Poco's ultra-wide sensor seems to be not as wide as the other two, so there's that. Now it's hard to pick one image here, but I think I'll choose the Realme's image simply because it manages to keep a balance between the sky and the building. Now for macro photography, this was a surprising result for me. First off, none of these cameras have the amount of details in the macro sensor that you would expect. I mean, you could just as well take a 64MP shot and zoom into the image to get the result you see here. In fact, a tad bit better, I might say. That said, if you're comparing, the contest is between the Note 8 Pro and the Realme X2 since Poco's image looks really washed out. Now moving on to human subjects, the Note 8 Pro doesn't even turn the HDR on, while Realme, well, it goes for a slightly warmer tone. Honestly, the Poco X2 wins this round easily, especially for the way it manages the color levels. The result is further highlighted in the portrait mode, where you can see that it's just Poco that retains the blacks perfectly while still resulting in a true tone representation of the background. The edge detection is the same across the board, though if you pixel peep a bit, you can see that Poco is ever so slightly behind. Not a big thing, but just highlighting that. Now in terms of video footage, all the phones support 4K at 30fps and 1080p at 60fps. Though to keep stabilization in account, I think I'll be recording all of the phones at 1080p at 30fps and 4K also at 30fps. So let's take a look at the results. Right off the bat, Poco seems to offer great stabilization alongside a good color balance as well. Both Realme and Redmi tend to wash out the colors, especially when panning the camera around. Now moving on to 4K footage, all phones don't have EIS on board either, but Poco still manages to offer a decent amount of stabilization here. Both Redmi and Realme are, well, super shaky, and I think we can safely say that if videos are your thing, the Poco X2 is definitely your best bet. Now let's talk about the front camera for a while. In terms of details, the Note 8 Pro does a great job while Realme's image is mostly soft. Poco enjoys being in the middle here, but turn the portrait mode on and it takes a massive lead. While Redmi goes for a warmer tone, Realme goes for a cooler tone, but it's just Poco that retains true colors. Sadly though, despite having a secondary sensor, the edge detection is mediocre here and at par with the other two phones. Now in terms of selfie video, once again Poco manages to keep a balance of colors overall, but it does tend to soften the skin textures. The Note 8 Pro has a sharper image but also with a higher contrast, while Realme tends to add a short level of bokeh to the video. Now the real test here was to keep my jacket's colors accurate, and I think Poco does the best job here. Redmi's footage has a higher contrast while Realme has a plain blue tone which looks pretty fake. Okay, so turning the lights off, you can see that none of the devices are good. Like seriously. Redmi once again does over contrasting, Realme whitens the image, and Poco, well, it doesn't illuminate the subject that well either. Now turning on the night mode doesn't help for any of the devices. Redmi adds a lot of noise and so does Realme. As for Poco, it adds a lot of saturation but the illumination is still unaffected. But this is when you have a light source in front of you. Moving on to pitch dark conditions, it's black in all three, while Realme can barely manage to see the subject a bit. Turn on the night mode and well, Redmi just has a lot of noise, Poco has a weird night vision mode, and Realme, while it performs better than others, doesn't look good either. Okay, so another subject here that I took purely in night mode reveals something quite special. If you have a single light source present, all three cameras will result in a halo effect. Realme has a super high noise here, while Redmi has a weird hue as well. Poco, well, it has a unique plus-like flair, but credit where it's due, it still retains the colors of the subject in the background. Basically, unless it's pitch dark conditions, Poco still might be your best bet. That said, none of these phones are good for low light photography, so yeah. Moving on to videos in low light, once again, they are all crap as you can see. I'm not even gonna stretch much here, they're all unacceptable results, but if I had to choose one, I'd pick the Poco simply cause it has the least noise. The video is still bad though. The story stays the same for selfies as well. Poco has some light, which is just the screen's brightness, but that's about it. Realme offers a night mode as well, which does nothing but reduce the grains, and that's about it. None of the phones can be used for clicking selfie pics at night, period. Now if you thought selfie photos were bad, take a look at the selfie videos in low light. Surprisingly, while Redmi and Poco are still decent, Realme is just trash. I mean, just look at that. Okay, so before we wrap things up, it's important to talk about 64MP modes on here. All three phones come with it and capture some super high size images. That said, Poco captures almost double the size of images, which is worth highlighting. Now as for the images themselves, they all look great as such with not a lot separating them, though Poco's image does have a bit more contrast. And even upon zooming in, the results are mostly the same across the board. Now I'll let you guys be the judge on this, but personally, I feel if you're really into the 64MP mode, might as well capture a raw image on the Poco from inside the camera and fine-tune it as per your liking. Well, that was the camera comparison. So which phone is the real winner here? Well, it's a tough competition, but right off the bat I can say if low light photography is what you're looking for, none of these phones fit the bill, but I think Poco still is better from the overall competition. Now in terms of actual overall daylight photography, including selfies and everything else, yes, Poco is definitely the best buy here, but that is not to say that Realme or Redmi are bad. In fact, Realme does give Poco a run for its money, even though it's priced a bit higher, and Redmi, while it does over contrast a bit, still offers pretty good results. This also brings me to the next point that yes, Poco might be the winner here, but personally, if I had to pick one phone that I would carry along on a trip to capture photographs, I would actually go with the Redmi Note 8 Pro. And the reason for that is that the photographs that it captures are consistent across the board. You know what to expect from the camera, and that is a big plus point, especially when you know what your limitations are and basically you can frame your captures in that specific way. So yeah, I would personally pick the Redmi Note 8 Pro, but from a critical point of view, yes, the Poco is definitely the winner here, with Realme coming slightly behind. Now, I'm also working on a Gcam comparison, which I'm sure a lot of you guys would be interested in, so make sure to subscribe to our channel and get notified as well. Also, if you have any more queries or if you disagree with me on any of my thoughts in this camera comparison, make sure to sound off below. I will be all ears and all eyes as well. This is Varun from Guiding Tech, and I'll see you in the next one.